Hey, welcome to Battle Ready. We have something I really think you're going to like. We're getting ready to head out to David City, a small town in Nebraska, to St. Mary's Catholic Church to put on a Battle Ready rally. I do these Battle Ready rallies in parishes all over the country. We're also going to be talking to several people about what it means to be prepared for the fight and the discipline that is necessary to be battle ready. Now, St. Mary's Church is one of these, it's an oasis in the desert. This is a church that is truly a fortress on the battlefield. Ladies and gentlemen, we're a military for the Lord. So when we hear terms like be a soldier of Christ, that's not some cute little nuanced sort of statement just to make us feel good. This is a very real battle. And if we're not ready for it, we're going to become a statistic. Brother Kimna, thanks for having us out here. No
problem.
You are the pastor of St. Mary's Catholic Church here in David City, Nebraska. This is a beautiful church. You just refurbished this.
Yes, yeah, we were about a year and a half back into it. We took a little time, a couple years to renovate, to repair, and also to refurbish and to bring us back to one form, architectural style, in our churches to help lead us and inspire people through beauty, through discipline, through order in their prayer lives.
How does that work, Father? That the architecture itself should have beauty, should have form to it. The painting is the sacred art that is just wrapped around. You walk into a church like this and you feel like you should pray. There's something that lifts us. Why is that?
Well, there's something to drawing about that order, and there is a style that permeates all the way through, and that has a tendency to draw us in to something more. And it was an order behind this. Thomas Aquinas, in his proofs of God, one of his proofs was order, that we see order in the world, and that is a step towards understanding that there's someone behind ordering it. Obviously, this church, the architect was behind ordering it, designing it, and bringing it to a particular way. And I think that reminds us of the order in our own lives, and the original architect, the original designer in our lives and in the world is God.
So we're created for order. We're not created for chaos and disruption and disorder.
Right.
Right.
Although my mother might, argue with that sometimes. That sometimes we're not necessarily created for the order that she wants. But Mom, I'm trying.
When it comes to discipline, order, I mean, those two words, they're really interconnected to a large degree. You can't have order without some sense of discipline. Yeah. I mean, the artwork, the beauty, the sacred art here, there's definitely a discipline behind the way this church has been refurbished and brought that beauty back.
I know your battle ready theme is it hits upon this hard, but it's actually scriptural and very, very Christ-centered theme, because he's asked how many people are going to be saved, and he says the gate to heaven is narrow and the path to hell is wide, but he doesn't really tell you how many. But there's an implied answer to that is, in order to get to heaven, it's narrow, but you have to live an ordered life, a disciplined life, and a prayerful life. And if you do that, then it's the number who can get to heaven isn't really decided. It just depends on who wants to live there. I think of the example of the UNL going to the football game. Those gates and those doors are relatively small, but there's 90,000 people get there every weekend for a home football game in relatively ordered fashion, and we leave in a similar way. So you can get a lot of people through narrow gates. It just means you have to live a life based on order. And that order is centered on love, willing the good for another person. And if we do that through our prayer life, through our spiritual life, through our decisions we make, there is no limit to what we can attain and what we acquire while we're here on earth.
How important is a disciplined, ordered spiritual life? It kind of gets set to the side oftentimes. As long as we kind of clock in, clock out. I say we go to Mass, put the hand on the Lord farm, we clock in, we clock out. And that sometimes is really the extent of discipline. But how important is really a disciplined prayer life, a disciplined sacramental life?
Well, if we want to grow, if we want to improve, if we want to get better, it has to be more than just the hour on Sunday. Yeah. I think we talked earlier about just the sporting teams. If a team wants to get better, and we've been very blessed here at Aquinas Catholic High School. We've had some very good football teams lately. They've done very, very well, but it's because they do more work than just practice time. They work, all the time, and they design them or set their weeks up in ways that help them get better. They set their summers up. They practice in the winter. They practice in the spring, doing other things so that they get better as a team.
So it's discipline year round.
It has to be year round. Yeah. In prayer life, in order to really succeed and grow in our prayer life, we have to work at it more than just an hour on Sunday. It has to be throughout the week. It has to be throughout the day. I know I went through a time in my own life where I thought, here's the hour for God on Sunday, and then the rest of it was my time. It's like, well, that's a recipe for not a lot of success. Because we have to be able to, it's not that you have to spend your whole time in church. Trust me, I want you to go home sometimes, guys. But you have to go out the rest of the week. But when we're going through, whether we're at school, we're at work, whether we're with our friends, no matter where it is, we have to bring God into that scene. Otherwise, we're not really succeeding and extending the reach of a disciple that we could, that we're called to. It's not enough just to spend that hour. We have to be willing to give all those hours to God, and then He will give us even more back.
And that sounds like what you're saying is there's a lot of choice behind that. You have to choose to do that. Mm-hmm. That's an act of the will. Yeah. And we brought this up many times in the show before, Father, is that owning our faith, really owning it is an act of the will. I've heard it said that discipline is that thing that is necessary for us to operate based more on what we know is right, not what we feel is right. And that kind of sounds like what you're talking about is in the day-to-day life. If we're disciplined in our prayer life and our faith, we're going to choose to bring Christ into the temporal, sanctify the temporal. Then.
Exactly. Every day, every decision we make. You're a father, you're a husband. There are times when you're not that? No. Right. You're that all the time, and you make your decisions based upon that. If we're going to be Catholic, if we're going to be Christian, there's no time we're not. So we can't act differently when we're with this group of friends or that group of friends, or we're at work, or we're wherever we are. We need to be consistent with what we are and who we are and profess. And that's what we need to be strong for. That's why we need to be disciplined. We need to be ordered for, so that we can continue to attain those goals.
If we're going to be disciplined, discipline rises out of love. It rises out of love. If I love my wife and I love my kids, I have to discipline my life so I can make sure I feed them, care for them, protect them. If I don't love them that much, then I'll kind of do whatever I want. I'll get under that wide road department, kind of let anything happen, no sense of discipline, no sense of order. And what do you get from that? When you have no order, you have chaos. From disorder comes chaos. How do we get to disorder? Largely, it's lack of discipline. So this is something the saints have talked about. The saints were very strict. Religious orders have a rule of discipline for the sake of keeping the order functioning well. Military knows this. You know what George Washington said about discipline? He said, discipline is the soul of any army. It is the soul of any army. Because discipline makes small groups a formidable opponent to an enemy. That's amazing. That's why you can see this when you have a small group that is well-trained, well-formed, even though, let's look at it in the sports world. The other team they're monsters and they're powerful, but this team is well-disciplined, they're a unit, they function so well together, they can still win, and they can win big. In the military, it's even more serious, more important. You have the special forces teams who are very disciplined, very well-trained. A good friend of mine, his name is Chuck. I call him Chuck Bo, after Rambo. Chuck Bo. Chuck Bo's been in the Navy 29 years. He's EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. His job is to take apart bombs and dispose of explosive ordnance. Can you imagine a roadside bomb situation in the Middle East? And he's been there many tours. You know what he says the toughest thing is? The toughest thing in the world, he says, Doug, is to come home from a tour, from a deployment, without one of your men. He says, so I train him, and I train him, and I train him again. He's a master chief. He says, my team, I put them through anything and everything you can imagine because they need to survive. I want them home alive. They have wives, children sometimes. I have to do all I can so that they come home alive. So they have to be what? Unruly, chaotic, disordered, or what? They need to be disciplined. You're dealing with a roadside bomb. And he says, you know, when it comes to roadside bombs, Doug, he says, sometimes you'll have a bomb and sitting right there, and it's covered a certain way. They've taken a mortar shell. You know, bad guys taking a mortar shell, and they've set it a certain way, and they've got tripwires coming out here. And he says the first 3 or 4 are just they're booby traps, or not. Excuse me, they're just they're misleading wires. They're not even legitimate. He says, and the bad guys oftentimes will watch from a distance, and they watch how we operate as EOD operates to take the bomb apart, and then they up their game after they see what we do. This cat and mouse game that goes back and forth where lives are on the line is pretty intense. We wouldn't want any of our military. If you've got anybody in military right now, you don't want them going off to a war zone or a situation like this without being well-trained, well-disciplined, well-ordered, or you know their chances of survival are much less. Why don't we see that in the spiritual sense? And if there's any example that we have of the need to be disciplined and well-ordered, seeking the will of God above and beyond how we feel, it's our Lord himself.
One more question for you, Father. Why is it that a disciplined, ordered life is such a threat to the enemy of our souls, a threat to the demons?
Well, because with order, anything's possible. I mean, look what a few people can do. I mean, look at the groups in our, like if you want to use military parlance, but the elite groups, the ones who do the most damage, are small, but they're ordered, they're disciplined, they're prepared. And they can do almost anything, and it's just I got a shiver just saying those lines. But that's why it's so important for us to be disciplined in our prayer life, because we can accomplish lots of stuff. And what they say, the devil with John, the Curé of Ars, that one priest in France, if there had been, a couple more, the devil would have fallen. Yeah. One man saved the church, probably for most of Western Europe. And helped revive the faith. And we need people like that now, because the sin is so strong. It's so prevalent, it's so rampant. But we need people to step up and say, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to do this. I want to really, truly be selfless and love and give for the good of others. That order, that discipline is what's necessary in order for that to happen.
So to sum up, why is a disciplined, ordered life for us, the church militant on earth, so necessary?
Well, I think it's simple because, that question they asked Jesus, how many people can be saved? It is the narrow gate that gets us to heaven. And it is the ordered life, it's the disciplined life that'll help us to get to heaven and help lead others to heaven as well. I think that's the key right there. It's for our salvation and the salvation of the world. And that's why we need it.
Physically, to be more disciplined, that's a struggle bus for me. I've tried to start really getting up at a set time and just to start having more of a routine with my life, especially with going into college in a year or so, having more structure instead of just random, what is my day gonna be? No, trying to be more structured that way, I guess, physically.
To more physically discipline myself, I find certain ways, with my schoolwork and the activities I'm involved in, and my relationships with other people. I find building myself up in those other aspects of my life makes me more open to spiritual, and my prayer life just really strengthens it. The more I strengthen myself in other aspects, it really just builds me up and makes me more like open to want to further deepen my relationship with God.
We are all like these fortresses or these stone towers, and the devil is roaming around that tower constantly, the demons, the fallen angels, without stopping, relentlessly. We know this from 1 Peter 5:8. Be watchful and alert, because your enemy, the devil, roams around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour, to destroy. And the devil roams around looking for a crack in the wall. So I want us all to imagine that our homes, our families are like fortresses, especially those of us who are fathers, husbands, and you ladies who are mothers, wives. Fortresses, stone walls all the way around, and inside the gift that God gave us, our marriage, our children. And the devil constantly roaming, the demons constantly roaming around looking for a crack in the wall of our family, of our home, to get in there and start just tearing apart at it like a rabid wild beast. And our job as parents, especially us as men, as the spiritual protector, spiritual leader of the home, in complementary nature with our wives who are the spiritual heart of the home, our job is to make sure that those walls are not cracked. And if they are, we find the crack, we discipline ourselves, order ourselves to get in there and fix it. And don't wait. One of the greatest opposites, you could say, of discipline is laziness. All right? We get lazy, we procrastinate, and we don't do what we should do. We're not disciplined in what we should do.
What I usually do when I am not disciplined, or I have a lack of discipline, is I pray something that I wouldn't necessarily want to pray. I'm trying to get into the habit, especially this Lent, of praying Divine Office. And when I don't do that, or when I forget morning prayer, or just don't do it at all, I wake up late or whatever the situation is, I tell myself, all right, now you gotta pray a rosary. I'm struggling in my devotion with the rosary, but I know that if I'm struggling in other discipline areas, by working on both of them at the same time, I think that increases discipline both ways. So that's what I'm trying to do, is build devotion to Mary and discipline.
I always make sure in school, when I walk by, through the hallway to my classes, you can see our chapel off to the side. I always make sure to make the sign of the cross, or I always make sure to pray before games, and just make it really clear that I am Catholic. This is who I live for, what I live for.
We're created for order. We're created for a disciplined life of order. God has made us that way. We're created for our homes to be that way. So this beast that's roaming around our families, around our lives, even the priest could say around their vocations as well, we have to guard every crack in the wall. And that takes a sense of discipline. And discipline takes an act of the will. There's a great quote by, I believe, the son or grandson of General Douglas MacArthur, if I'm not mistaken. But I can say this. This is a great quote. That discipline is that lifestyle, that behavior that teaches us to operate off of principle, not off of feeling. How many times do we do things because it feels right, and we don't do things because we don't feel like doing it, even though we know it's right? Now, I've run into this over and over the years when you bump into different situations in a talk like this, and maybe somebody comes up afterwards to the table. We have a table back there with CDs and DVDs and some great books to read back there my son wrote. Come check out the table afterwards. People will come up oftentimes, and a lot of times it's the women who will come up and talk. And they'll always say to me, Doug, do you have anything for my husband? Now, this can be both humorous and very serious, so let's kind of address both here. They'll come up and they'll say this many, many times. My husband is a good man, but... Some of you ladies are laughing already. Yeah. He lacks discipline. He lacks that which allows him to operate based on what is necessary, a principle of what is right and wrong, as opposed to what he feels like doing. So if he doesn't feel like praying with the kids, he doesn't do it. He's not disciplined enough to do it. If he doesn't feel like going to church on Sunday, or feel like getting to confession regularly, or feel like taking the kids to confession, he doesn't feel like talking to his kids about the importance of these things, he's going to operate off what he feels like doing. He feels like, because he's tired from work, I understand that. You're tired from your job, you want to sit down, you just want to watch TV, you want to read your newspaper. Now, ladies, this can happen to you too. All right? You ladies know that there are things in your lives where you allow cracks in the heart of the home. There are certain things that the woman has a particular ability to do that men don't have the same gift to the same degree. I'm not making blanket statements here, but face it, when my kids were all younger, if there was a problem and they were hurt, they cut themselves, a lot of times they'd go to mom. Why? She nurtures. So your 7-year-old boy runs in, Mom, look, I got a cut. Oh, okay, we'll clean that up. We'll put a Band-Aid on it. We'll take care of it. What's Dad do? What? Put some duct tape on it. Get back out there. You're fine. Yeah. So the guys are thinking, yeah, so? I keep duct tape in my Jeep for that purpose, right? But the point is, you ladies have a particular ability to nurture. And of course, that comes from our Lord in the intercession of our Blessed Mother. And so something powerful about that the devil despises. So if the devil can crack the wall or find the crack in the wall when it comes to a woman not fulfilling that ability, that great gift, that feminine genius, as St. John Paul II talks about, how women can impact the entire world in ways that men don't. Archbishop Fulton Sheen put it this way: the nobler a woman is, the nobler a man will be. That in the history of societies, civilizations could be written about based on the level of the womanhood. If it's a low level, you got a society that's going to crumble fast. If those women are holding that bar high, and that doesn't mean empowered and tough and I am woman, hear me roar type of stuff. Talking about the woman who really imitates Mary and realizes the power of the humble yes, not the doormat. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the humble yes that fulfills the will of God, that seeks the will of God, that says yes like Our Lady did. And the devil's going to look for the cracks in the wall for you ladies. Your discipline, your order, the way you keep target and track of your lives is essential because you are the heart of the home, and it takes both the head and the heart for the body to move. So husband and wife, we need to work together on this.
I think one time you put it best, like, if we weren't praying the rosary every day, like, where would our lives be? Where would our spiritual lives be? So, like, it's that physically praying every day and making that commitment to pray it, even though, some days you're just like, oh, man, this is going to be 20 minutes.
But it's the knowing that if you skip one day, it gets easy to skip the next day, and then the next day, and then before you know it, you're not doing it anymore. So it's kind of just that. It's
the discipline.
Yeah, it's the discipline of just, we got to do this. We got to focus and do it. So
you can discipline your physical self and your spiritual self at the same time. And so like when you may want to eat all that junk food that looks really good, abstaining from it and saying, I'm doing this for someone in purgatory that really needs this, or I'm doing this for a family member that really needs my prayers. I've found that it just helps to kind of strengthen that discipline in both areas of my life. In my school, just when somebody's being really irritating or something, really seeing the face of Christ in them and loving them in that moment, even though it may be difficult. And it does take a lot of practice, I guess, and that's where I think that discipline comes in. When you are completely focused on Christ, it makes it that much easier to really love His people and His church.
The discipline that's necessary to look at the cracks in the wall and see where they're developing and then what to do about it. And that's an act of the will. Because if we're too lazy, too procrastinating, too tired, I don't feel like it, we're not going to get out there and fix the cracks in the wall. And it's been said by the saints in many different ways. I'll just paraphrase and summarize a lot of stuff I've read over the years. We all have predominant faults or predominant weaknesses. You could say it's like the predominant crack in the wall that just kind of keeps showing up. Like I asked earlier, who goes to confession for the same sin over and over and over? Well, sometimes that's predominant weaknesses that we struggle with. There's certain things some of us don't struggle with. It's just not a big area. And then there's other areas where, this is one I really battle with. There's different reasons for that and circumstances, and regular confession, deep prayer, and even spiritual direction can really help us discern those things. But as the saints will say, if we do not address the predominant fault with a disciplined attack, a conscious effort, an act of the will, I know I'm weak here. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to address it. I know I suffer from procrastination or laziness. I know I suffer from, I talk too much or I don't talk enough. Maybe you suffer with your discouragement. Maybe you're easily discouraged. Maybe you're someone who you struggle with certain areas of fear. Maybe it's just there's an attitude. You're quick to a hot temper, whatever it may be. Whatever the predominant fault, predominant weakness is, if we don't address it and attack it with a sense of discipline, a spiritual discipline to get in there and fix it and change it, then the saints will say in so many words, we are likely to fall to any and all other faults. But if we, by the grace of God, in the intercession of Our Lady, if we attack with a disciplined attitude and get in there and systematically keep working on those predominant faults, there's nothing that by the grace of God we can't overcome. Motivation is like feelings and emotion. It goes up and down. Discipline, as even I heard a retired Navy SEAL say, motivation and inspiration is like feeling. It's like emotion. It comes and goes up and down. Discipline is who you want with you in the foxhole to fight the fight. Because discipline is a rule of life. Discipline is what allows you to accomplish the task. Discipline is what ultimately keeps us on the narrow road, and by the grace of God, we enter into heaven.